My name is Millie Kapara. I'm the Director of Grad Pathways, which really oversees a lot of professional development offerings for grad students and postdocs here at Davis. One of the professional development components that I provide is workshops and support generally for preparation for GradSlam. And you'll find out later in the presentation that if you become a finalist, you'll work more closely with me honing your presentation as well. All right, so let's get started learning about GradSlam. So what is GradSlam? Essentially, it is an annual contest to communicate research, really at the heart of it. To provide you with a bit more historical context, it is derived and modeled after a competition that was developed in Australia called the 3-minute thesis. So the University of California developed their own model of this and called it GradSlam. Still presenting your research in 3 minutes or less. And that really serves that challenge serves to create an opportunity for you to communicate your research to any audience. And that skill can be broadly applied in a wide variety of spaces, including policy spaces, if you really want to change the world around you and change rules, in educational spaces, and even perhaps even at Thanksgiving, when you want to communicate your research to people that aren't necessarily in your group, that are in your family. So we'd love to help you on your journey of developing those skills. And that's really the heart of GradSlam. This is a kind of flyover overview of what GradSlam, the competition, really entails. Right now, we're in that top section there in the qualifying round. So right now, you can submit your video submission online of your recording of yourself kind of doing your 3-minute talk. And you can submit that right now. And the deadline is February 9th when that portal closes. After that closes, we have chosen our finalists. We move to the UC Davis final round here and in April, also in this room. And then in the winner from the Davis round will then compete with all the other UC campuses' respective GradSlam winners as well in San Francisco on May 3rd. Welcome. So that's kind of a flyover. I'll go over into a little bit more of what that entails. So as we go into more details for each one of those rounds, like I mentioned, the video submission portal, that's open right now. We're in the qualifying round. Who's eligible to do that? All master's and PhD students are welcome to participate in that particular round. After that portal closes, we're going to have a group of different audiences of staff, faculty, community members will be evaluating your video submissions. And that group will narrow down the field of competitors down to 10. Those finalists, like I mentioned, will compete in the UC Davis final in April. So there isn't necessarily a prize associated with becoming a finalist. However, we have seen that in previous years, those top 10 will get a lot of marketing. There will get a lot of, we'll be able to kind of disseminate that through UC Davis and broadly to all the UCs that these are our finalists. You can definitely use that to your advantage to share out and things like that as well. So that's kind of not a dollar amount of benefit, but more of a publicity and professional development component. So in the final round, you will be competing for cash prizes, and I'll tell you more about those prizes as well. And then the top finalist that comes out of our UC Davis competition, the winner there, will then compete in this UC-wide competition against all the other UCs that I mentioned, and then we'll compete for even more prizes there as well. And I'll jump into those details. Okay. I've broadly been addressing what the benefits are for participating in GradSlam, helps you really hone in on what matters to you most in research. And you'll hear me say this later, and you'll see this in various other ways. Really focus on the why of your research. That's going to propel your ability to hone in on a story, to relay the significance, to really engage your audience. That is one of the best North Stars that I've heard from previous winners. Really refine your story or pitch, and that again, you'll continuously do that as you try to communicate it in 3 minutes or less. Definitely will be able to communicate with a broader audience because you will have to conceptualize a lot of the nitty-gritty in your research to be able to deliver it in that context. Again, it's a lot of practice goes into this, so you'll definitely be honing your presentation skills in both a recording way, but also in front of people if you make it to the final. And then this is, even though there's a lot of prizes, there's a live competition, I feel like big stakes. Think about this as a friendly, low pressure setting initially, especially when you're recording yourself at home. Just keep practicing. That is kind of a more low pressure setting as an entry point. Also, a lot of people who have placed and won prizes in GradSlam have been previous contestants that were not finalists before. So I'll talk later in terms of the eligibility that you can continuously enter GradSlam even if you become a top 10 finalist. Now the winner cannot continuously enter GradSlam, but everyone else can. So because we want you to really build these skills, it's a professional development opportunity. And win prizes, those are great too. Cash is great. And these are the prizes. So you'll see that the first place prize last year, it was actually $2,500. We've doubled it to $5,000. We have noticed that there were other UC campuses that were offering a bit more, and we'd like to be competitive in that way as well. Right now, so these are the previous year's amounts for second, third place, and the People's Choice and Public Impact. We're presently trying to increase all of those. So know that we don't have a set amount for those, but know that they will be higher. We are very optimistic, actually, about that. So look forward to those. I'll also be sending these slides out to anyone who registered, so you can have this as a reference. So I've talked a lot about the benefits, but at its core, it's really, like I've mentioned, a professional development opportunity for you to build these skills and train and prepare and hone your presentation skills. While we're going to have these top 10 finalists and UC Davis winner, all of the University of California is not putting all these resources for just a small amount of group. We want everyone to really benefit from this process of developing your research presentation and communicating broadly and engaging the public with your research. So I mentioned training and preparation. There are a variety of ways you can do this. I know that we're already pretty close to the deadline. So there's a certain amount of things that you can do at this point. And there have been previous workshops that we've had in January and in fall. However, many of them were recorded and you can revisit them to really continue your training and preparation. So the first two are presented by a previous PhD student at UC Davis, who now is able to talk about their own journey into presentation skill and her own presentation skills. The first is one of the earliest entry points to this and biggest barriers to developing these skills, really just overcoming public speaking anxiety. That's a hard barrier to get over. And really, she talks you through it really nicely through that. The next level would be kind of creating a really effective and memorable presentation. We have a couple versions of that from different people. So the latter ones would really give you a lot of different angles on how to craft a presentation effectively and really communicate your research. So feel free, like I said, I'm going to send you these slides. These are all clickable and they're all available on YouTube. So that'll take you directly to them. Take advantage of those. And hopefully throughout those workshops and through a variety of different ways of preparing and practicing, you'll be able to get from a dissertation amount of research all over the place to just communicating your point A by introducing to really kind of conveying the impact you want to your audience with a concise presentation. All right, so I've talked a lot about what it looks like, how long it is, what the benefits are. I want to tell you a little bit more about how your presentations are going to be evaluated. And this criteria I'm going to share with you is going to be the exact criteria that your video submissions get judged on, but also during that final round and here at Davis, and when we have like a panel of judges in the back, they will be using the exact same criteria if you get to that stage as well. All right. So when you're submitting your video submissions, you won't be judged on your video recording quality. If you have a webcam from like 2005, that's not going to matter. It's as long as you can be heard and for the most part seen, there is a degree of, we won't be kind of judging quality there. I'll talk a little bit about kind of the delivery of it and how much of that can be a criteria, but we can get back to that. Okay, so let's start with these three criteria here. Clarity. Clarity is going to be your most important criteria. I would say focus on that first, because without clarity, you're not even able to discern other components very well. So clarity is going to be your foundation for really conveying your message. Make sure that you're providing the appropriate amount of knowledge, that you're really introducing the right level of topics, level of depth for your audience to understand the presentation. Then it's organization, kind of that narrative arc. Are you presenting it in a logical way that people can really take that information in appropriately? So make sure that the sequence makes sense. Delivery, like I mentioned, there is a certain amount of enthusiasm in your voice, a pace that you can hit as you're delivering that presentation. An enthusiasm and confidence in your voice. There's also body language involved in how delivery makes an impact with an audience. However, I know that that is probably one of the hardest things for you to convey over a video recording. And we are all kind of aware of that too, that within if you record yourself on Zoom and it's a little tiny box in the corner of your slide and try to do all your hand body language and the thing is difficult. So make that as organic as possible, and use more of your voice and your intonation, your cadence to be able to present effectively. And we'll keep all that in mind, given your limitations there. Whereas in person, all of that will then be very much taken into account. All right, so the fourth criteria here, appropriateness. So this is a tricky one. So we talked about kind of clarity. Now this is more, can you communicate this to a wide variety of audiences, right? Is the faculty in the room able to understand it at the same level than a high school student? For example, the UC-wide competition always ensures that there is a high school student on their judging panel every single year. And so you want to be able to communicate at all levels of education, ages, experience, knowledge. And that is the challenge. It's a really exciting challenge though. So that's really important for really considering your audience. Intellectual significance. And this is where we get to impact. What kind of, why does your project matter? And that's what I was talking about, thinking about your why, not just why it matters, but why does it matter to you and why should it matter to others? Really think a lot about that. And that significance is definitely going to be brought into the judging criteria pretty importantly as well. And lastly, engagement. When I talk about enthusiasm that's kind of coming from you, you also want to generate that enthusiasm from your audience, really connect. It's a lot about connection with your audience, and creating that intellectual curiosity for them as well. Does it lead them to then want to learn a lot more? Are you just kind of this 3-minute hook for them to learn a lot more about, I'm blanking on a bunch of things. You'll see a talk later, but about, oh goodness, cleaning up pollution. Wow, this is ridiculous. I also have a PhD. I was like, how do I communicate my further research? Wow, this was fun. How to improve your memory. There we go. That was my research. All right. Let's see. So that was all of the criteria. I know that they all blend together to create really effective talks, but take them into account as you're developing your presentation, and we'll see some examples as well and talk about that. So now that I've talked about judging criteria, I mentioned that in a qualifying round, it's going to be staff and faculty and community members that will be judging your video submissions. The judges are going to be as much from a wide variety of backgrounds as possible, especially in the qualifying round. And we'll try to minimize as many, we'll try to minimize conflicts of interest and hopefully have zero, where a faculty advisor is not, evaluating their advisees' video. However, at the level of the UC Davis final, we're really going to have not just staff and faculty. Last year, we had a news anchor. We had a leader in information, I think it was information technology and security and cybersecurity. I think we had, someone from the library, a faculty member. So, and then like I mentioned, the UC wide competition always has a high school student. And so the audiences are very, very broad. So keep that in mind constantly. All right, so more rules and regulations. So I'm going to jump into more nitty gritty. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, everything's pretty straightforward. Yeah, Hawanya was, yeah. No, no. We will often see submissions from early graduate students that are first or second year that will say especially because you're speaking at such a conceptual higher level, you can really talk about kind of your contribution or what you plan to do, what with this intricate introduction of what the big problem is, what my approach, you can have a method plan and say, we're going to tackle it this way because we're going to try to make this impact. And we're already seeing preliminary something or anything like that. And I've seen that still land really well. Yeah, in a variety of ways. I think last year's UC wide winner, I think also had not completed all of that research as well. So there's hope there. Yeah, anything else? Yeah. Yeah, so we'll watch the UC Davis winner towards the end of today. And then in the presentation, there are links for all the talks from 2023 at Davis, the top 10 finalists, and all the talks from 2022 as well are in the presentation. So feel free to watch them later as well. Okay. All right. So we're going to jump into more rules and regulations, the fun stuff. For the video submissions specifically, I mentioned you can record yourself via Zoom, but you can also just like prop a camera or a phone and record yourself as long as you can be seen clearly. And as long as you export the video in an MP4 format and you upload that. Most likely, because I've seen people record themselves just with a camera if they're not using a slide, because a slide is optional, and we'll talk about that later as well. But the 3-minute video has to be continuous. You cannot use any editing software to edit any part of the 3-minute talk on the between the beginning and the end. A great way to record yourself, and that I've heard from other people do recently, is just set something, start recording, and do your talk like 10 times, and then crop out the one that you like the best from there. And that is perfectly fine. You can use editing software like that. Just crop it in the beginning or the end, submit that. What you can't do is take like the beginning minute of one of them with the last 2 minutes of another one you like and splice those. Nope, can't do that. Has to be continuous. So yeah, no editing software to modify any part of the inside of the video. All right. Okay, and timing. As I've mentioned, this is a 3-minute or less presentation. There are punishments for going over 3 minutes when you're presenting. There are no There are no punishments for being less than 3 minutes. So you'll often see a lot of the winning presentations are like 250, 245, 255, something like that. Because it's also hard to nail it every single time, but trying to aim a little below is recommended. And this is really the deduction structure for if you go over. This is also going to be applied to your video submission. So just know that. However, in the UCD final, you'll have like this big red digital clock that'll be facing you. So you'll know what time it is and how long you've been talking. And we've seen people who realize they're out of time. It is more helpful for you to just stop talking rather than finish your thought because you're losing points every second. And often, and sometimes that might happen, you know? So keep that in mind. And you can't go past 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So aim below. Please, yeah. Yeah. No. You can, yeah, just start talking because if you were to give the exact same talk from the video to the in-person final, you will be introduced by someone up here, and then your face will be up there, your name and the name of your talk. You usually, when you want to start talking, it's your talk, your hook, your like beginning of your talk. There's precious time. Yeah, so, but when you submit a video, if you submit a video and maybe you didn't crop it fully and you don't start talking till like 15 seconds in, that's perfectly fine. We don't mind that. But we won't start tracking it until you start talking. Yep, please.
There's a points listed up here. What's the point scheme like for the entire talk? Like, is
Oh,
one
yes.
a huge amount?
Yes, you get 5 points for every single one of these criteria. It's out of 5. Yeah, I should have normalized that or standardized it to let you know. And then they're all added up. Yeah, and then so the points, pretty big deal. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's 20 points total for 5, or is it 25 points? Is it 5 categories?
Oh, it was 6 categories, so it's out of 30. Yes, I should really hammer that. I'm gonna edit this. Those points are pretty precious out of 30 points. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the clarification. Okay. Did I do? Oh, I went back. Got it. Gotcha. Okay. So we talked about timing, talked about the recording itself. Let's talk about the slide. You can only use one slide. We recommend PowerPoint, but like I mentioned earlier, a slide is optional, and we have seen people be successful without a slide. But please don't use Prezi or actually, never mind. You have to use PowerPoint. No, but and definitely not Prezi. It's too discombobulating, or other presentation formats. So please, a PowerPoint slide. You have to create your PowerPoint slide yourselves. You can't ask someone else to design the slide, but you can use the PowerPoint templates that are offered within PowerPoint. You can include visual elements like charts, some data visualizations, photos, clip art, things like that, created by someone else, as long as you credit the original creator. I know there's a little bit of nuance there in terms of clip art, which seems like, it's a universal kind of domain. I think there is a bit more flexibility. And I think you asked me about clip art last time. I think there is flexibility to just use clip art that's fairly basic and not have to find the exact creator of that specific clip art.
Canva is $95. It's not infringed. Like, you think people will take Canva stuff and put it on their Etsy store or like their dropship store because it's usable to pay a fee. Like, you get to like
Oh,
do some things.
yeah.
It's the free element. I think it's the part, but I'm not so sure about distinction. So I'm like, does Canva free stuff act the same as the part? Can I use that?
I would say yes. I'm gonna go and say, if someone gives you no problem, you send them to me. Yeah. The Creative Commons, that's what I was looking for. Nice, that might be helpful. Yes. I believe last year or the year before, it might be last year, visuals was taken out as a judging criteria. It used to be a judging criteria, but now it is not something that actually gets points applied to it. It doesn't mean that it's not influencing the clarity of your presentation. So you're not going to be judged by the prettiness of your slide, things like that. But it does really influence how people are intaking information. So just keep that in mind. While I'm saying that there's one slide and animation effects are allowed, which means it can look like 5 slides. You can just like put one in and animate a whole new one, just replace it and animate a whole new one to replace it. But be careful with that, because then you really might be distilling the point that you want to make by cramming information on there. So just be really kind of aware of the balance of information, busyness, and how you're wanting your audience to receive your point. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay. Please. For your video submission, I've seen most people do the Zoom, like share slides. That's usually easiest. It's a little tricky because your little box is so small, but I have also seen people do it next to a slide and kind of pointing things out. Whatever is easier. In the video, you have a lot more flexibility. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Research that they take into the design. So I'm assuming citation, you don't do that.
I haven't seen as in-depth citations. I've seen some small ones that is like really brief, but people are very careful with it's prime real estate up there with how much space you have. Yeah, I mean, you feel free to send us your slide and then we can kind of be like, oh, actually, these are too many things that might not be actually cited properly. So yeah, I think there's a lot of flexibility. And if you watch a lot of GradSlam talks, you're not seeing a ton of citations, right? So feel free to look through a bunch of them. Let me know what you're thinking, but I'm happy to look it over as well.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking more so. There's no, like, I would love to citation references, but I don't think process here. And I'm in humanities, right? So like.
I see.
Citations are important. We need to credit ideas.
Of course, yeah. Oh, no, like, so in the process, there's not an actual step for that, but it doesn't mean you can't. Yeah. All right. Okay, so we talked about visuals a little bit, but it's not part of the judging criteria. Doesn't mean it doesn't impact how you convey your ideas. For example, in 2019, our finalist from UC Davis, who actually went on to win the UC-wide competition in San Francisco, her initial slide, Katie Murphy, looked like what's on the left, trying to give a lot of information, a picture for reference of what she was working on. But that's a lot of text. That's a lot for people to read, especially with the amount of time. After working through her presentation, her final slide actually ended up being this one on the right, much more simple, that conveys the concept that she's trying to make corn stronger in a really, really simple way. Whereas over there is a lot of acronyms, a lot of parentheses, a lot of long words that might not be, a lot of jargon, essentially. So that shows how you can really convey a point very simply with just with an image. And also this is a constant improvement, a process of improvement. Even from her talk at UC Davis, where she won that competition, she continued to improve upon her talk when she went to the UC-wide competition. And this slide evolved even more. It became like a corn on the cob, was like even more clear that it's corn. And I think also that, hits you over the head with the point that she's trying to make and was very effective. So just take that home. Yeah. All right. So let's see, we talked about, I'll rules and regulation, we saw visuals. I mentioned earlier, and I just kind of want to remind you, any UC Davis graduate student currently enrolled in a master's or doctoral graduate program, including the professional programs, including the law school, the nursing school, they can all, as long as they're part of master's or doctoral programs, they can participate. Everyone is eligible to compete in GradSlam. Some common questions that we've seen before. I talked about, I participated before, can I enter again? Yes, we talked about previous participants can definitely enter again, even finalists. However, the final winner is not eligible again. Research-wise, when we talk about, because there's, oftentimes people are part of broader research groups, a lot of different projects are happening. You have to be presenting on research that's related to your graduate research here at Davis. If it's part of a broader collaborative project, you must be able to address and clearly show what your contribution was within that project. So basically here, Davis research that's happening here and that you have contributed to. You may be tempted to want to put some audio or a video in your presentation. Audio and video clips are technically not permitted unless you have a really, really important reason for putting it in there. We don't see them very often. The times I've seen it work and actually be permitted, I actually saw one that went to the UC-wide competition. The effect of her talk was about the change of the population of a particular, I think of birds in a particular rainforest in a region. She made that impact and relayed that message by playing the sound of what it sounded like in a rainforest, 30 years ago versus what it sounds like now. And the impact of not just going from really boisterous bird sounds to barely anything was really impactful. And it happened quickly. And she made a convincing point that that was necessary. You would have to make a compelling point for why you would want to use audio or video, especially because you have such little time. It's hard to lean on someone else saying something in your video or seeing, it's a little difficult to balance. So we just want people to be careful there. So just know you'd have to make an exception and it'd have to be for a good reason. Props are also allowed, but also need to be cleared. I have seen props used successfully. Last year's UC Davis second place used a sock puppet, a monkey sock puppet, because she worked with macaque monkeys and she needed to display very clearly what I think the stimuli they were interacting with looked like and how they were reacting to it. And it was engaging, hilarious, informative, so many things. And it worked really well, but she did have to clear it with us first. Primarily, it should not make a mess. There might be things that you want to work with that are hard to clean up, and that's much just more difficult than anything. I saw someone else also bring in a deck of cards to symbolize shuffling through computer programming. It was really effective, and the different model of essentially shuffling different items. And that was helpful. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of some final conditional regulations on those, on visuals and props. You'll see this reminder throughout the presentation. Submissions are due February 9th. So we're gonna watch a GradSlam talk, which I think a couple of you might have already seen, but it's a good reminder of what a successful GradSlam presentation looks like. So this is our last year's winner, Julia Mowat, who won here at Davis and then got second place at the UC-wide competition. Her presentation, Grandma's Ghosts and Jeans.
Picture your grandparents. What do you know about them? Their lives before you were born. Where did they live? What were their jobs? What kinds of foods did they eat? Maybe you don't know the answers to a lot of these questions, and that's okay. I don't either. But research has shown that the lives of our grandparents can affect our health today. So maybe your grandmother smoked a pack a day, or your grandfather worked in a power plant and was exposed to high levels of pollution. Maybe your grandmother took certain medications during pregnancy, or your grandfather lived solely on burgers and whiskey. These types of social factors, lifestyle choices, and environmental exposures can increase the risk for certain diseases in you, their grandchild. In particular, researchers have found that grandmaternal cigarette smoking may increase risk for autism in the grandchild. The question of my research is, how does that happen? To understand what we think is going on, picture your grandmother back when she was pregnant. Your grandmother is shown here in blue, and the fetus in yellow will someday become your parent. But there's actually already a third generation present. See these green cells inside the yellow fetus? Those will eventually become the sperm or the egg that will create you. And that's really important because inside each of those green cells, there's DNA, shown here in gray. And on top of the DNA sit these molecules, shown in black, that act as switches to turn certain genes on or off. These have sometimes been referred to as the ghosts in our genes. And cigarette smoke can cause these ghosts to move around or increase or decrease in number, inappropriately turning important genes on or off permanently. And because researchers have seen this connection with autism, we think the genes being affected are those related to how our brains develop. And so to research this, I am using DNA samples from individuals with autism, and I'm examining the patterns of these ghosts on their DNA, and then comparing those patterns to the smoking habits of their grandmothers. And this type of research is still in its infancy, but I think it could have implications far beyond cigarette smoke and autism in our quest to understand multi-generational risk as well as resilience. And so as we all take this time to reflect back on our grandparents and the lives that they led, let us also think about our own lives and consider that our actions today could impact generations to come. Thank you.
That was second place, yeah. I was there and I thought she should have won it all. Yeah, the first, and this is not in any way to say that anyone else didn't do so great, but it was about COVID. And for the last 2 or 3 years, presentations about COVID have won. So in case you want to change your research completely to COVID and then win, but I think that that's a compelling point for people right now. So it was very related. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about what you just saw. Given the judging criteria you've heard about, what you generally were thinking about in terms, or what heard about visuals, pace, delivery. She didn't get to her PowerPoint slide until like a minute in even. What was the take-home message for you all? Mm-hmm. A big impact. This is a generational impact. Exactly. Yeah. What stood out to you about the talk? What made you say that was good? Yeah.
There's a lot of science there.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I noticed that I didn't really get the research aspect of what I discovered in like the all an idea, concepts and maybe more what I was expecting. There wasn't any like concrete data, no aspect of what she had done.
Yeah, you'll find these are not research seminars. You'll find that a lot of it is idea based. And that's why I'm saying they don't have to be complete. She didn't present any results whatsoever. It was like, this is my approach that can make this big impact. And you'll find in a lot of different GradSlam talks, that's a lot of the core of the presentations, because you don't have time to dive into dive in deeper, we're also going to have to explain more things, give more context, give more scaffolding, and that takes time too. So as you continue to watch more talks, pay attention how high level they keep it and how accessible it is. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, good narrative, good flow, visuals that were very clear, color coded, came at a good pace, really came together. She pointed them out really clearly. On the TV, you couldn't quite see the color differences as well. But they're definitely there. And the pacing, you could see her pacing, her cadence was very good. Yeah. Please. That's right.
But I was curious.
That might be a question for how long her journey had been preparing that, because in her video submission, that slide was definitely like that. Yeah, and that might be due to her own history of kind of presentation skills building as well that she has been doing. Her delivery was a little bit different because in the video submission, I remember her telling me she had practiced it like 50 times. And by the time she delivered and gave a final video submission, her tone was a little different. And we were like, you're kind of didn't seem very happy. But she delivered the content. And she was like, because I had just said the same thing 50 times. But I think when you're in person, that engagement and that ability to connect changes. So yeah, that might be a good question as well. And yeah, we will also invite the previous winner to connect with the finalists as well in that section to be able to give some insight to that process. Okay, so that was so that is pretty much all the rules and regulations I wanted to share with you regarding the competition. And we even saw a couple examples. But I wanted to give you a few next steps. I know that we're about a week away from the deadline here on the 9th, a little more. And so I wanted to give you possible kind of options for next steps. One of my colleagues, Beth Tweedy, who is the STEM librarian for life sciences here at Davis, has an amazing expertise in presentation skills and is available for consultations on presenting. Beth actually partnered with me to give another workshop to prepare your GradSlam, but even though she is an expert kind of, and her job is in the life sciences, she's absolutely happy to talk to anyone in any department across any discipline. She is really good at making presentations widely accessible. She's available. So if you scan that QR code, it'll lead you to this website so that you can make an appointment with her for a consultation. And she's generally pretty available. It can be over Zoom, in person. You can be as kind of early in your process where you just bring your research and you're like, where do I carve out a 3-minute story within this? Or, okay, I have a story. What visual do I want to put with it? Yeah.
About the consultation, is that only in regards to the competition? Or is that
Oh, that's anything. Anything. I'm just saying that this is a resource for you to prepare for the competition, but Beth is perpetually available for, like, if you want to give it a conference presentation, poster presentation, a seminar, if you want to put data visualizations together for your paper, she's also really good at that. Visualizing and communicating research, her bread and butter. So definitely use this resource perpetually. Okay. Other ways you can prepare. So our GradSlam winner, Julia, that you just saw give a talk, also wrote an article recently called 5 Ways to Amp Up Your GradSlam Application. In the slides, you can click and go to that as well. She has kind of the pointers of how she went through her own process and what helped her. You can watch a recording of a previous workshop that I did with Beth to make your presentation a GradSlam dunk. She really goes into the specific steps of creating your visuals, practicing how to craft a narrative together into 3 minutes. Yeah, please.
One of the last things like making cute titles.
Yes.
And so I don't think there's a tab for It's like, we're academics, we can just put it in one title. So like, can I give an example of one that I thought of?
Please.
So, my talk title could be doing science responsibly, or it could be doing science responsibly, managing the risks of socially relevant science, and protect harm from marginalized communities. That's a more informative title, but it's not as cute.
Mhm.
Is there a compliment and which one would you prefer?
I would say there's no limit. However, just as there's no limit on animations, you might want to be aware of how much you're putting in there. And if you want to make it broadly accessible, I would stick with your first one because you're going to be able in your presentation to emphasize the other parts. So I think that can, and it could also breed some curiosity as well. Like, how responsible? I don't know. Yeah, any other questions? And it also links to all the GradSlam talks for the past couple of years. I think there's even more to 2021 and 20, I think there was not a GradSlam in 2020. And I think 2021 was virtual. And then 2019 should be on there as well. Okay, so make sure to visit those. And yeah, if you scan that, that'll take you to the GradSlam website, the Davis GradSlam website. Go to competition information. You'll be able to submit your video there. You can also go to that bit.ly URL perpetually. That'll take you to the same site. Remember, video submissions are due February 9th. The final round is April 12th. The UC-wide competition is May 3rd. So if you're really ambitious, just block all those off. And if you have any questions, please contact gradevents@ucdavis.edu.